This is Laura Maylene Walter. I'll be reading my Rumpelstiltskin retelling called Little Rattle Ghost. For 3 nights I went to her, and for 3 nights I waited for her to ask. Each long night, from moonrise to sunrise, we sat together in a straw-lined room. Straw everywhere, beneath our feet, in our hair, wound round and round our limbs. By the end of the first night, I was convinced that if I were cracked open, straw would spill from my body. It was stuffed in my lungs, in my veins, in the twisted contours of my brain, in the valves of my heart. She gave me things I did not want, a necklace, a ring. I held the ruby up to the moonlight and watched it shine. I twirled the ring on my wrinkled little finger. All the while I felt her watching me. I wasn't a prince, and I certainly wasn't tall or handsome or even of her kind, but I was gentle, and I could comfort her if she would have it. I told her I could save her. I told her I could do the impossible that the king had asked of her. I did not tell her how one strand of her hair was more luminous than all the straw in the world, or how one note of her voice was almost enough to lift all the magic from my bones. Mostly I worked, hours and hours toiling against all that straw while she curled up in the corner and wept. I worked faster, spinning straw to gold, and waited for her to ask my name. She never did. On the morning of the second day, I passed her father, the miller, in the market. He was drunk and forlorn. He wailed something to the shopkeep about losing her, about blame and consequence, and this stirred even my gnarled little straw heart. I wanted only to impress the king, not send her to her death, he was saying. How she has survived so far, I'll never know. It's me, I wanted to say. I was standing right at the miller's feet, looking up, 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 but he had not noticed. I took a hold of his pants leg, the fabric rough as burlap, and gave a pull. We live in a time of unspeakable brutality, the miller said, and without bothering to look down, he jerked his leg and kicked me to the dust. The straw increased each night. Where did it come from? I pictured the king raiding every stable of every farm on his land, snatching the straw from underneath unsuspecting animals. Sheep sheared and vulnerable without their beds, cows dumbly disappointed, mules standing on aching hooves, and the horses. I couldn't bear to think of the horses, those gentle, loyal beasts. On the third night, the king promised to marry the maiden if only she could spin this final room into gold. Stacks of straw towered to the ceiling and spilled across the floor in a dry, scratchy sea. My maiden was trapped with barely enough space for the loom in her chair. When I came to her that night, she was weeping as usual. I threaded my way through the room to rest a rough hand on her arm. She did not recoil as I expected, but continued to sob, only softer now, as if I might be some comfort. If you help me once more tonight, she began, I will give you anything. She stopped herself, sniffed. I will give you everything. I looked around the tower room. Maybe, I was thinking, we could devise some sort of ladder out of straw and escape together. I have no jewelry left, she continued. No gems, no stones. She stared straw-eyed into the stacks. But soon I shall be married to the king, and I will have riches enough to offer you. I have no need for your worldly treasures, I told her. My maiden's face turned to tears again. If I fail, he'll kill me. For a long while I said nothing. The silence was so great that I started to think maybe she would do it. Maybe she would ask my name. I know what you want, the maiden said at last. She dried her tears and sat up straight on her straw throne. You want my firstborn child. I looked around at the blinding yellow straw as if it could come to my rescue. I knew it would come to something like this, she said, and nodded, determined. So be it. I hereby promise you my firstborn child. I didn't know how to correct her. I didn't know how to tell her what I really wanted. So I said nothing. Instead, I sat at the loom and began the long night's work. My maiden fell asleep with her head on a pillow of straw. I saved that bunch for last. My mother gave me this name. It's an ancient name, a dusty name, a name of our forgotten language. Roughly translated, it comes to Little Rattle Ghost. That's what we do, she told me. We slip, we hide, we rattle. We might not be real ghosts, but we frighten men and save maidens, and we can spin most everything into gold. My mother died when I had barely begun to rattle, when I had only just learned to make gold dust from grass clippings. When she left, she carried my name away inside her dead mouth. No one knows what I am called. I live alone and live apart, and no one standing on this earth has ever said my name. No one has even thought to ask. I finished my work by dawn, then slipped behind a pile of gold to wait for the king. He burst in at first light and roared at the sight of his new riches. He spilled praise after praise upon my maiden, who smiled meekly into her lap. The wedding was set for 3 days hence. The miller, I heard, went and bought himself a new suit. She never called for me. She never asked. Once I climbed through her bedroom window to rattle the shutters and drapes, but she only rolled over in her sleep. The king lay beside her, snoring, his fat stomach rising and falling with each breath. My maiden's crown of jewels rested cockeyed on the bedpost. I still had her ring, her necklace. I kept them in a box buried under my house. Time passed. I heard through the town gossip when she was with child. It was born a girl, sweet little princess. I decided to pay my maiden a visit. I missed the straw. With straw, maybe my maiden, the queen, wouldn't be cowering against her bedroom door, clutching the newborn princess to her chest. Please, my maiden said, anything but my baby, the whole kingdom, my precious stones, you can have it all. I thought how she and I spent 3 nights together, how I made the floorboards sag with the weight of gold, and still she never asked. My name, I said at last. You have until tomorrow to learn my name. If you do so, I will not take your child. The queen sputtered with hope. She began to list off names at once, but her guesses were messy and misplaced, like blown-out dandelion seeds. I sighed and told her she was wrong, and wrong again, and wrong once more. Wrong forever and ever and ever. That night I built a bonfire behind my house. I sat in the dust and watched the flames climb their flickering heights. Gold is gold, but fire is fire. She should know my name cannot be guessed. She should have simply thought to ask. I still remembered the way my mother called my name, her voice soft and rough as a cat's tongue. I was so small then, barely bigger than the pink princess now. A moving shadow near the trees caught my eye. Slowly I stood up. Could it be? It might have been just an animal or the wind in a branch, but I believed otherwise. Perhaps the maiden had followed me home, hoping to discover my name. Even if it was just one of the king's messengers, it could be enough to save her. The thought made me pop my heels in a little dance. Somewhere in the shadows in the forest, a person might be watching me. I danced a little faster, lifted my knees a little higher. I rattled every part of my body that could rattle. For the first time in my life, someone from the outside had sought me out, thought me important. I hoped it was her. I hoped she could see me now, alive and dancing. I wasn't so small anymore, moving here in the shadow of the fire. I wasn't so alone. I imagined her eyes on me, her crouch in the deep dark woods, the way she hid to learn the loveliest thing about me. And so, filled with a hope my kind so rarely knows, I sang my name into the night. The next day, the queen guessed 53 names. Every last one was wrong. I waited. She guessed 68 more names, then another 79. 225 additional names, all wrong. The baby was in a bassinet in the corner. She made no sound. Tell me, I said to my maiden, were you not in the woods last night? Confusion crossed her face. A servant, perhaps? A messenger sent on your behalf? My maiden shook her head, sending the tears flying. Then you know what I must do, I said. She hurried over to the bassinet and snatched up her daughter. Never. I looked at the baby. I had no use for a child. What would I do, set her alone in my little house in the woods? I've sent for the king's soldiers, the queen said. They're coming to destroy you. She clutched the baby tighter. You nasty thing, I don't even know what you are. I looked at her, but I did not speak. I thought, I am Rumpelstiltskin. My mother named me so. I held out my arms for the child. The queen veered away. They're almost here, she said, and her voice turned to a sob. They'll save me yet. It was true. Already I heard the clatter of hooves across the drawbridge. I could almost smell the gun smoke in the air. 3 nights, I told her. 3 nights, and you never even asked my name. Her face was like the moon. Her face was like a bale of straw. Her face was like the ashes of my bonfire. The palace was shuddering now, the soldiers storming in. I reached for the princess. My fingers were gnarled and tough and magic. I could grasp stronger than any human. But my maiden was a mother, and she held her baby true. I latched on. Even then, with my sharp fingernails digging into the baby, my maiden did not ask. I could see that, in fact, she never cared to know. "You monster," she wheezed, pulling the princess back with all her weight. "You dreadful, dreadful beast." The baby wailed between us, and my maiden showed no signs of release. The soldiers were nearly upon us. So I gripped, and I pulled harder, and we ripped her child in two. This is Laura Maylene Walter reading my story, No Dog, which was inspired by the Lydia Davis story, The Dog Hair. We have a wild home. We have a kitchen sink piled high with greasy dishes. We have overflowing laundry baskets, unmowed lawns, great spreading mud puddles under our boots. We have dust bunnies and smoke stains, carpet fuzz and toothpaste splatter. We have clogged lint traps and sticky garbage cans. We have no dog. We have no dog. Sometimes we forget we ever had one, or that his name was Bertrand, or that he had an orange collar with a bell. We forget the clack of his toenails, the musty scent of his fur, his cold, wet, hard dog nose. We forget his lunging stride, his dash for the bone. We forget his begging, his exposed belly, his drooling, meaty gums. We forget his face, that flapping tail, the shag on his legs. We forget the shag on his legs until we go to the county fair and see the Clydesdales all done up in their harnesses. We forget the dog until we smell leather and horse manure. We forget the dog until the Clydesdales move past us, stunning the ground with their weight. We forget the dog and then remember him and forget him again and forget him harder. We forget the dog so hard we go limp. We forget him until we are reduced to gray matter, to a twisted, pliable disaster. We forget him until we are sucked backward in time, past all the broken wristwatches, the horoscopes, the love notes, the locked closets, all of it pulled through a wind tunnel toward the hot magma of the earth where our forgetting piles up. And still there is no dog. And still we are left in our messes, the newspaper smacked against our snouts, and still we are hopeless and grieving and incapable of remembering our dog. That white dog with the brown spots, that dog with the shedding hair and itchy paws, the dog who turned himself into a smattering of stars all hot and sharp and full of gas. He turned himself into stars. He turned himself into stardust like the shag of his coat, like the shattered detritus of our house. He is the stardust that comes when we call, stardust that rolls over to show its belly, stardust that even right now drapes its glittering folds over our belongings to swallow whole all that we have lost and are destined to lose yet again. This is Laura Maylene Walter reading A Girl Walks Into a Page. A girl walks into the pages of a fantasy novel and flashes her sword before the dragon. Just before she swings, she looks into the dragon's eyes to see her own slender self reflected there, pale and vicious. A girl walks into 18 horse books at once because she cannot choose among them. Once inside, she splinters into 18 smaller girls with 18 horses to match. She remains there today in 18 clover-strewn fields, clutching 18 horse manes as she gallops into the distance 18 times over. A girl walks into the pages of her algebra book and turns into an unsolvable equation. A girl walks into the thick, creamy pages of an etiquette and manners book. At tea time, her dress spirals into a doily and her hair unfolds into handkerchiefs. She is trapped there until the end of time, sitting stiffly upright, her napkin unfolded across her lap. She always uses the proper fork. A girl walks into the pages of an Amelia Earhart biography and loses herself in mist. For months she circles the sky, blind, while waiting for the fall. A girl walks into the tissue pages of the Bible where she witnesses the creation of the heavens and the earth. She watches the first fish bubble and froth in the sea, birds flash alive in the sky, and land mammals blink their way into being. She glimpses Adam in his nakedness, the coy and silent Eve stepping from his rib. Then the girl takes a wrong turn and gets lost in hundreds upon hundreds of begats. A girl walks into a book of fairy tales and is eaten by the wolf in 15 different ways. A girl walks into a page and walks out dripping in ink. It coats her smooth as a seal, blue, black, and reflective. She opens her mouth to scream, but only more ink pours out. On and on it rolls, black and heavy and shining, arcing and heaving out of her body like some hellish, vomiting rainbow. A girl walks into a page and cuts herself on the fine, sharp edges. Blood runs crossways down her arms and torso, whips in her eyes like rain. Still she walks on, deeper and deeper, until the pages slice her sideways and she disappears, leaving only a constellation of red flecks splattered across page 323. A girl walks into the Word document on your computer. She hides between the T and H in your header, but peeks out now and then, watching you work. Every time you type a new sentence, she sneers. A girl walks into the unfinished novel draft on your desk and, after falling into a plot hole, begins the slow process of starvation. A girl walks into the last line of the last paragraph of the newest document in your computer. She curls into a tight ball to fit herself into the final period and squeezes so hard that she pops through the back of the document and into the brains and guts of the computer itself. She twists, full of electricity, through the hard drive and motherboard, seeping at last into the power cord. From there she makes her way to the outlet, through the wall, and into the power lines outside, where she flows with the power of thousands of volts. She remains there even now, humming and dangerous, as she streams through wires black enough and sharp enough to be inky lines of words pressed straight and deadly against the sky.